The first thing you need to know about me is that I was raised in a very bookish home. I'm talking bookshelves on every single wall in every single room that could possibly fit a bookshelf. I was being read to before I could read, and I was reading whenever I had spare time. As a child, I was a massive bookworm. My mum has worked in the writing industry as an editor, an author and a publisher, and my dad's just a giant nerd. So most of the books on my parents' shelves I had not read because while I was living at home, I was not interested in those kinds of books. I thought they were all a bit foreign. I knew that mum did a lot of academic research, and her specialty was sort of, don't shoot me if I get this wrong, mum, sort of world wars, women's history, beginning of last century and the end of the century before that. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, mum. So I didn't think I was very interested. There were a lot of fantasy titles included on those shelves, and I did try and read one or two of those, but as a preteen, and sort of like, I lived at home up until the age of 16, so during that period, it wasn't what I was reading. I was reading Twilight and The Hunger Games and Divergent and the Spiderwick Chronicles before that, and Harry Potter and the Roman Mysteries and, oh my god, loads of other things. I did read some of my mum's like childhood favourite books every now and again, but they weren't quite what I wanted. Now I am an adult. I am nearly 30 and I am a much more mature reader than I was. I am able to take steps out of my comfort zone. I am actively trying to take steps out of my comfort zone and read things to expand my sort of little bubble of literature that I tend to try and stick to. What brought this on was that recently my parents have moved house. I helped them pack up their whole library and put it back in like the library of my dreams in their new house. It occurred to me that as I was shelving the books, because I offered to shelve all of them, I love shelving books, I find it very therapeutic, I had not read anywhere near as many of these titles as I would like to have. So I curated a little list of books that I have seen on my parents' shelves my entire life, it felt like. Don't come at me if like publication dates don't line up. But these are books that I see on my parents' shelves every time I go to see them, and I have done my whole childhood growing up, and I thought it was about time I read them. So I picked 6 books and I'm going to explain to you, and these are they. We're going to start off with the obvious one. This is the 39 Steps by John Buchan. My mum did her PhD on John Buchan. She is a John Buchan scholar. I have met and had dinner with John Buchan's great-granddaughter in her house. A very fancy house full of taxidermy and a very scary like taxidermy bear that I was morbidly interested in as a young teenager when I met her. But I have never read any Buchan. So I'm going to pick up the 39 Steps because it is the most famous. I deliberately didn't ask for any recommendations from my parents because I think that would be a very different video. These are just the ones that like leap out at me, and I figured I'd start with the most popular John Buchan. So the 39 Steps is first on my list. Next is kind of a cheat. So it's The Colour of Magic by Terry Pratchett. My mum and my sister are huge Pratchett fans, and I have recently in the last couple of years also become a Pratchett fan. But I unwisely decided to try and start my Pratchett journey with when I was about 12 or 13, I want to say. And those who have read Pratchett will know that this is not the greatest place to start if you're looking for an engaging start and to get sucked into Pratchett's writing, because this is the first book that he wrote in the Discworld and he hadn't quite got the hang of it yet. I have read 6 or 7 Pratchetts now. I've read some of the Night Watch, a lot of the Witches. I've read some others sprinkled in between. I've kind of forgotten what. I have a spreadsheet, but I've never gone back to read this because I did try and read this when I was a preteen and I did not like it. I didn't quite get the humour. I remember very vividly having to read, I don't know how far in it is, there was a joke about insurance, and it took me like 3 reads of the page to understand that he was trying to make that play on words, and I just didn't get it. So now that I'm a little bit more well versed in Pratchett, I'm going to go back to this and I'm going to finish it. And it's okay if it's not the best one I've ever read because I just read a very good one, so I'm allowed to have that dip. The next one is very hard to miss on the shelves because it's a big boy. This is not the edition that we have on the shelves. I will say I got these like from charity shops so that I could do this video. We had the burgundy paperback copy, but this thing is huge. Like, it's big enough that it can write the title horizontally on the spine. That is how big this thing is. I always thought this was a boring, like, history book. Like, for the longest time, I did not realise that this was, like, a well-known fantasy book. I genuinely thought it was a history book about these two people. And I was like, oh, that's a cool name. Someone, like, I'd love to be called Jonathan Strange. Like, that's such a cool last name. No, they're just fantasy people in a little fantasy world. So I'm going to have a go at reading this as well. I'm not looking forward to it. Not really. That's where we're at with this. The other person who was very heavily featured on my parents' shelves is Anne McCaffrey. My parents are big fantasy readers. Like, it's not a big surprise that a series all about dragons is going to be there. I found this in a charity shop and I was very pleased about it because it's the first one in the series, as far as I'm aware. Yeah, the first Chronicle of Pern, Dragonflight. And as someone who loves dragons and was obsessed with dragons, my first tattoo was a dragon. It was our friend Smaug. I need to read this. I need to give it a go. I don't always get on with old school dragon books, but it's not very long and everyone had to start somewhere, so I'm hoping I will appreciate this. I am also, and I don't have a physical copy of this, I'm going to listen to the audiobook, going to read the first book in the Earthsea cycle by Ursula Le Guin. Again, big name in fantasy. I love looking at our copy because I love the artwork on the cover. I have seen the Ghibli film and I fucking hated the Ghibli film. So I'm hoping the book is better. I'm optimistic. I'm not like that optimistic. Yeah, I'd like to read the book and see what the differences between the book and the film are. I'm not reading the whole quartet. I'm just committing to the first book. And then taking a swing away from fantasy, my parents, I say parents, it's mum. Mum has loads of Ngaio Marsh's books. I think it's pronounced Ngaio. That's what my dad says, but there is a G in there and I'm not very sure. Ngaio Marsh's book, she does murder mysteries and fucking loads of them. There's like a whole shelf of her books on my parents' shelves. So I think I should give this a go. I found this in a charity shop, so I didn't pick this title specifically myself. It was just the one that I came across first. It's called Overture to Death, and I believe someone dies at a piano in like a city hall or something. Shot between the eyes. Drama. Anyway, I love me a murder mystery, so I think this one's gonna be good. And then lastly, I can't do this video without reading one of the books that my mum has published. So she currently runs an independent publishing company called Handheld Press, and I used to work for them. I used to do social media for the first year or so of the company's business. I can't think of it a better way. Yeah. Of the first year that they were in business, and I used to help out at stalls and markets and things where we'd go and sell the books in person. But I have never read any of the books that my mum has published all the way through, and it's about time that changed. I do own a couple of them, but the two that I like the most, and so I bought them, are anthologies, and I don't always get on well with anthologies. So I wanted to read The Caravanners by Elizabeth von Arnim. This is supposed to be very funny. It is about caravan holidays. It's about an Edwardian caravan holiday in Kent, narrated by the pompous and self-important Baron Otto von Ottringel, a Prussian major in the German army. So it's supposed to be very funny, and I believe that everyone he comes into contact with is just very like, oh, for God's sake. And I think that could be hilarious. So it's a novel as well. It's not an anthology, and I think it's about time I read a Handheld Press book. I will link the website down below. Handheld Press are actually wrapping up, so they've now published their final book. They've been in business, I want to say 5 or 6 years, and they've published loads. Like the first anthology, the one that I have, is called Kingdoms of Elfin, and we got an endorsement from Neil Gaiman. And that was very exciting. We've published lots of Sylvia Townsend Warner. We've got lots of weird anthologies, so anthologies of weird fiction. If you don't know what weird fiction is, it's like the in-between step between regular stories and horror stories. So it's not full-on horror, but there are like weird elements. So like, I think one of the examples is there's a story about a woman whose scarf just tries to murder everyone, and just weird things like that. It's like weird fiction is its own genre. I think Google will do a better job of explaining it than I have. So yeah, that's my stack. Plus the Invisible Ursula Le Guin, which I forgot to count in the beginning, so technically it's 7 books. But that's where we're at. I will catch up with you when I have read some of these. Bye! Hey friends, I've read 4 of the books on that list, so let me talk you through them. I'm going to put this pen down because that annoys me. Sloth is where it's at. Let's start with Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. Jonathan Strange, even, is a very long book that does not need to be that long. And Susanna Clarke really likes going off on very long tangents about somebody's grandfather, great-grandfather, their mother's sister's cousin's uncle, their mother's sister's cousin's uncle's chicken's best friend's rat. I don't know. She will go off on the longest tangents that have next to nothing to do with the character she actually wants to introduce to the story, and it drives me fucking bonkers. I DNF'd this book about 15 hours into the audiobook, and I was only like 60% of the way through. So this book was not for me. I understand people who have grown up on classics and that style of writing, they would enjoy that more, that they are used to that style of writing. There were also just not enough women in this for me, and nowhere near enough diversity. It was all stuffy white men discussing magic. That was all this book was. And yeah, I was not having a good time. I was trying to knuckle down and like blast my way through it, and it wasn't happening. So I stopped that. I DNF'd that, and I think that was the best thing for me. Then I picked up A Wizard of Earthsea. This was also not for me. I understand that this is a classic. It was brand new and of its time when it first came out, and I understand why people were really excited about it. I understand that people love this, and I understand that it did great things for the genre of fantasy. I can see that, I understand that, but to me, it fell foul of the trope of having someone who is talented go to a mentor who says that they will mentor them and then not teaching them fucking anything, so that then the student gets into loads of trouble because the only way they're going to learn is by going off and making their own mistakes, and then they get berated for trying to make these mistakes because the mentor didn't teach them anything. So that infuriated me. I wasn't blown away by this. I thought the world building was interesting. It's a world that we don't normally see. I haven't seen many archipelagos in fantasy, so I thought that was like a nice setting for it. The dragons didn't particularly blow me away. It was a little bit creepy. It was a bit moody. The main character spent a lot of the time being sulky, and that's just not super enjoyable to read about, in my opinion. Overall, not for me, but I understand why it is as important as it is, basically. I'm going to break this up with the 39 Steps, which I did enjoy. I did enjoy the 39 Steps. I enjoyed the devil may care attitude of a rich white man doing whatever he pleases because it's entertaining, and whatever he pleases at this point in time is going on the run. That made me chuckle. It was entertaining the way that he like took it on as a challenge to challenge himself and see if he could do it and get away with it. And I really enjoyed the sort of discovery aspect of the mystery towards the end of the book. This was not the book that I thought I would enjoy out of this list. I didn't think I was going to enjoy Buchan, but I did. So I feel like I owe my mum an apology. Sorry, I guess. Turns out I like Buchan. Maybe I'll read more. Who knew? And then The Colour of Magic. I understand now why I was always told not to start with this book, because it's Terry Pratchett's first Discworld book, and his writing and his world building is still a little bit clunky and a little bit sort of finding its feet. He hasn't quite grasped that sort of streamlined wit that all his other books are so great with. That didn't make sense. You understood what I meant. This is a story about Rincewind and Twoflower the tourist, who literally just go on a tour of the disc, and it's the gods playing chess games which affect their movements. And as a showcase of what the disc is and the world and the satire, I think it is a really good book. No, it's a really good showcase. It's a really good example of that. As a book in itself, not that interesting. The plot needed some work. It was kind of all over the place. It felt like it should have been an anthology of short stories almost, with the way that they were hopping from one adventure to the next with very little like connecting parts, if that makes sense. I'm glad I read it, just because I'd like to say I've read all the Discworld books at some point. But yeah, I don't start with this book. This is a book for people who understand Pratchett and want to just read everything. I think it's not amazing. I have finished the last 3 books. That's how you can see them. I've finished the last 3 books on my list. Let's talk about them. I'm going to start with the one that I didn't like, because I liked 2 out of these 3. But the one I didn't like was Anne McCaffrey's Dragon Riders of Pern. This, I think, was a product of its time, which I found myself saying a lot in this video. I can see why this has been so important when it comes to other fantasy novels written after this book. I can see why this is considered quite a formative novel for the fantasy genre. I understand why Emma Caffrey is a prolific writer and a famous writer in those circles. Like, I've read it, I get it. It's not for me. I think I am so used to the way that modern fantasy is written and the style and the plot beats to expect and the scope of the worlds being introduced. I'm so used to that when it comes to like a really tight, concise novel where world building is all telling, there's not a lot of showing, and you just kind of have to take things at face value rather than experiencing them for yourself. It doesn't sit right with me because it's not what I'm used to, and it's not how I'm used to absorbing stories. The major bit that I didn't like is that this is a very patriarchal society. Women are tools rather than people. And I just, when the whole plot revolves around a society like that and it doesn't revolve around making it better, I'm just so uninterested. I also didn't realise this is technically sci-fi because it takes place on another planet and that is specified. And they talk about sort of using different kind of tech. It's like a weird collaboration between fantasy and sci-fi. So in my head, I was having a little bit of trouble placing it when it came to like the genre. And because I like my books to fit in neat little boxes, that also didn't help, but that's a me problem. I enjoyed the dragons in this because it's hard not to enjoy dragons. I enjoyed that our main female character was fiery and that she was quite independent. I just really did not appreciate the way that sexual assault was handled in this book because there is a lot of it and it is described as the norm because that's how that society functions, and that's just a no from me. I think if I had been alive and of the correct age when this came out, I would have enjoyed it. But because of who I am and what time period I grew up in, I don't think I was ever going to enjoy this. I will not be continuing this series. Moving on to something that I did enjoy. I really enjoyed Naomi Marsh's Overture to Death. This is, I'm not going to use the word cozy because it wasn't really. It was quaint. I think quaint is the right word. So it's about a group of people in a village and there are two old ladies. There's the squire of the village, the squire's son and the squire's son's girlfriend, and the doctor and the doctor's mistress basically are all trying to put on this play. And the two old ladies are kind of frenemies. Like, they're friends because they've got no one else to be friends with, but they do hate each other and don't want the best for each other at all. They fight over who's going to play the overture and the entr'acte in the play because they both play the piano and they both want to show off. There's a switch at the last second and the lady playing the overture, as soon as she starts playing, she is shot through the piano. There is a gun hidden inside the piano, which kills her, and it's a murder mystery around that, trying to work out what's going on. It's a murder mystery, trying to work out who killed her and why as well, because although she was like a horrible old lady, it's more a case of there are too many motives to want to kill her, which is always a fun way to start. But this was delightful. I listened to the audiobook. I highly recommend if you have access to that. It was just so self-contained. It was so funny. This is the 8th book in a detective series, but because it centres around the characters and the murder rather than the detective, it didn't feel like that, and it was absolutely fine to read, having not read any of the other books as far as I'm aware. There were some references to like overarching plot arcs from previous books. They just kind of told us what they were, so it wasn't hard to pick up on, and it didn't really feel like you'd missed anything. So I really recommend this book. I will definitely be reading more Naomi Marsh. This is exactly the kind of murder mystery I love. It felt like watching Midsummer Murders or Jonathan Creek or something like that. Like, there's the element of ridiculous to it. Everyone's funny. Everyone kind of hates each other, so everyone's kind of like, oh, everyone could have done it if they'd wanted to. And there was a bonus little twist at the end. Like, it's not going to blow you away, but I think it is a very good example of what to love about this genre. Love it. Absolutely loved it. Will definitely be reading more Naomi Marsh. Then I finally read The Caravanners. I have finally finished a book published by Handheld Press. I did enjoy this, but this is told from the point of view of a horrible, horrible man. And if you are unable to separate your feelings from the book, like I am sometimes unable to, do not read this when you're in a bad mood, because it will make you incredibly angry, because he's a horrible, horrible, patronising, homophobic, fascist man who is he's just a bastard. Eventually you do get, like, the story gets more vindicating, but he is absolutely horrible. I feel so sorry for his wife. I feel so sorry for everyone else that decided they were going to go on a caravan holiday with him. The only thing that I sympathised with him on was how fucking miserable, cold and damp he was the entire time, because caravans are awful things. Camping is a horrible activity that I don't understand why people do it for fun. Why would you want to be uncomfortable on purpose? For me, it was a little long. I felt like I didn't need some of the more long-winded bits, but I guess that's also being true to the fact that he is a long-winded sort of person, because this is him writing his diaries of the caravan holiday. So he is going to say exactly what he thinks. I would recommend this if you want a funny story with an absolute dickhead as the main protagonist and narrator. I would recommend this. That's that reading experiment over. I am pleasantly surprised I actually enjoyed any of them. I'm a bit sad I didn't enjoy the ones I was kind of hoping to enjoy, but I think overall a lot of these books they're old books, so I'm not always that great with old books, and this has been kind of a lesson in what older books would still appeal to me now. The answers being murder mysteries. Murder mysteries are always safe. Like, I would happily pick up more Ngaio Marsh, and it makes me want to pick up more stuff like Dorothy L. Sayers and other Agatha Christie are mentioned on the blurb of that book, so I'd absolutely pick those up at some point, I think, because if they're anything as good as that book, I just really enjoyed myself. Overall, don't think I'll be borrowing anything other than Ngaio Marsh from my parents anytime soon, but it's nice to know what a sort of smattering of their tastes is, having stared at these books on their bookshelves for years. And yeah, let me know if you think you'd pick up any of these, or if you have read any and you felt the same way as me or different. Hay fever is absolutely kicking my butt right now. So I'm gonna go, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks very much for watching. Please like and subscribe if that's your jam. If you want to see more of me, I put videos out every Sunday, and they are usually bookish in nature. So thank you for watching, and I will see you soon.